It is the 21st of October 2021. I hope everybody's managing, doing good, doing bad. And this is the last show of the week. It always takes us a moment to get up to speed. My apologies. It's a big operation. Little old me. And you. It's a good thing I'm not by myself. We got 14 people on our show. Okay, it's the same thing as... Here we go. Well, without humans, biodiversity is blooming in Fukushima power plant. Fukushima power plant. Whoever wrote this article should be ashamed of themselves. There's no biodiversity at the Fukushima plant, all right? This is actually just a regurgitated story of a fake study because COP26 is around the corner. But in reality, eerie fog of silence around Fukushima plant. The first surprising thing is there's no sounds in a no-go zone. And I've seen Colette saying there's a large volcano. A large volcano exploded in a huge black cloud. I done 50 stories today and I managed to miss that. It's amazing, isn't it? So we got a vote. We got a vote here tonight, a poll rather. Should the United States clean up the Bikini Atoll? And so it was a minute late tonight, my apologies, but I seen that comment, I had to go check it out. And so sure enough, let's go 24 hours. I'm assuming that's what's going on. No. This week. Yeah, I've never seen that story. Look at that thing, eh? I'll have to check and see if there's any nuclear power plants in that area. Because, I mean, you know, that's significant, right? That is significant. Eerie fog of silence around the Fukushima plant. How about that? Does that counter the story? That's a ghost town, by the way. The eliminations of human, or I think it is. The elimination of human society has produced an unprecedented habitat for wildlife. Now, all they're going to acknowledge for wildlife is bullfrogs and pigs. That's their version of wildlife. There's some twisted stuff. Animals are starving as the food chain collapses in the Pacific. Mass starvation event plagues the West Coast. Former government official, the elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific Ocean animal die-off. While biodiversity is not blooming in the nuclear wasteland at all. And not in the power plant for sure. Hard cases. Following the event, 154,000 people were removed from the region. It was actually 500,000 people evacuated. That's a number second only to 335,000 are claiming was removed was Chernobyl. So they're trying to claim now that Chernobyl was worse than Fukushima, right? It's a real sleight of hand, isn't it? Fukushima was multiple reactors. They were the biggest reactors on the planet. They were 800 tons. Pure uranium, pure plutonium. The reactors at Chernobyl was a brand new reactor, and it had a 200-ton reactor core. This is brutal, don't get me wrong. This is graphite, mostly graphite. It's not plutonium, mostly plutonium uranium, which the ones in Japan, which makes them thousands of times more powerful. Number 3 in Japan was a mixed oxide fuel. You don't know what that is. It's about 2 billion times worse than a normal nuclear brutal meltdown of a reactor. And 60 million bags is the new number.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
outside the fence, 60 million tons. Now he's on national TV, the foreign correspondent. He's not just going to regurgitate nonsense, right? Okay? Well, you got to think about how big of a deal was this in Japan, right? Well, all these prefectures, for instance, the food was banned from 55 countries. Half of Japan. And Japan, radioactive fallout, this is the plutonium-239 dispersal covering the planet, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. Coal, oil, and gas doesn't do that, right? So this is from the 11th. Let me check the date on the model right now. The model starts on the 12th, of course, because it didn't happen on the 11th, the detonations. So on the 12th, so this is basically a 2-week dispersal model. It's at the 19th to 20th, 21st, 22nd, 11, 10 days, 12. So the 26th, the plume covers the entire planet. So when I say Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming, it's because that didn't stop. It doesn't just stop because the model is stopped. It means, boom, the entire planet is wrapped in an invisible snowstorm of energy pulsing every second. From friggin' power plants. Not oil, not gas, not coal. They don't have these attributes. Just nuclear does. It's not a game. We don't got any time to waste. All the species are disappearing. And I've done multiple expeditions. We confirmed it. This is not an opinion or conjecture. This is fact. We've done the research and we see an extinction event playing out. The media has been captured by the industry. The regulators have been captured. And the universities have been captured a long time ago. And their children, their little inbreeds and their little despicable inbreeds are currently in position of authority. And these are the entitled lot. These are parasites, goblins, and vultures. They know what their parents done. And I know what those parents done. And they're riding easy, sitting high in their towers, ivory towers. And they don't even understand the significance of it. They're so self-centered, so egotistic. They've lost their way before they were even born. Their genetic pool is damaged a long time ago. This is real, folks. This is an extinction event. We've documented it. It's a wipeout. There's model after model of the radioactive fallout. And we got the numbers. We got the absurd numbers. It's absurd the documentation that we got. The species and ecosystems are having a fabulous... Man, these crazies are scaring me sometimes. experience in the non-existence of humankind. So it was a nuclear expert in the country that wrote it. It was translated to another language, I suppose. I didn't translate it. I translate a lot of stories every day for years and years and years. This one was already in English. Probably sounds like it was written by Rod Adams, but he was drunk or something. The thoughts of being driven off on their own home by the destructive razor-tusked invaders. Evacuees from Fukushima City have been hesitant to return to their previous quarters, to their generational homes. You desensitized weirdo. And they're talking about razor-tusked invaders stopping them from coming back. That's pigs, right? That's wild boars they're alluding to. The major Japanese media writes that food from Fukushima area still draws an adverse response from customers due to the reputational radioactivity. Reputational radioactivity. Actually, I've never heard it framed that way before. A February study by Japan's Consumer Affairs agencies discovered 8.1% of 5,000 respondents would wait to purchase farm products from the Fukushima due to lingering concerns of radioactivity. 8.1% of 5,000 is 400. So that means the rest of them are being poisoned, because if you're getting food from far outside of the major grow areas, I'll show you, look, average absorbed doses to the red bone marrow. I think this was 2012. Remember, it never peaked till the next year, the numbers. So the second line right there, average disposition density of 137 cesium. And so the first line is communities. First line is communities. So as you start to go down, you see big numbers, yeah? Huge numbers. Huge numbers. So UN, in the anniversary of this year, said there was no adverse health effects from Fukushima, but yet the communities are incredibly radioactive. Unbelievably, hideously, monstrously radioactive. Yeah? Where am I there? It's these 229,000 atomic decays per square meter. So break your room down into square meters. Then multiply it by 229,000. And you can kind of wrap your mind around the environment we're actually talking about. But that's just cesium. That's just gamma. They're not looking for alpha or beta or neutrons. So as you go down through the list, you see everything is contaminated. All the communities are. That's not acceptable. And if you don't speak out now, they'll do it to you next. These are cowards. These are not your average human. These are simply cowards. Incredible cowards we're talking about. And for Fukushima radiation to not harm the population health, I'll challenge that in about a minute, that assertion. So this is the line of radiation. That's the people living in the environments. All of these communities are radioactive, which means their water is radioactive. The water reclamation facilities are going to be radioactive. You won't find no adverse health effects in a nuclear wasteland. Who are these people? Why are they put on a pedestal when they have zero credibility? Not even a little tiny bit. It's terrifying. And everybody is running to them for answers. It's called a Stockholm syndrome. Fukushima radiation did not damage the health of the local people. Well, why'd you move them all away? By the way, You didn't move them all away. You didn't move these people away. They're in radioactive wastelands. 50 becquerels, if not 37,554, but 50 per meter is an evacuation zone at a nuclear site. How come it's not the same for communities? Because the entire industry, entire legacy is predicated upon lies and deceptions and pure evilness. They haven't got a single person in the United Nations or in the nuclear industry that the world can relate to. Not a single person. They don't have a single person, spokesperson, that you can name off the top of your head. Or that I can name off the top of my head. That's likable. That is able to, even got a little bit of a personality. Nothing. They all got a poker face, every one of them, and it's not a good one. Air samples in Tokyo, 270 times more than contaminated with cesium than global weapons fallout peak. It means you're supposed to evacuate Tokyo. It means that's a horrible thing to do to people. That's unprecedented. We have no examples of that numbers to such a large population with a total disregard. They did pass out water for the babies, right? And then the nuclear industry pulled the plug on that. On popular interest to the scene, American bullfrogs. So they got pigs and bullfrogs, and the biodiversity is thriving. Well, they're radioactive pigs, by the way, we're talking about, and so are the frogs, who will cannibalize each other, by the way. Kids, they'll cannibalize the tadpoles, right? Kids have also been planned to assist. What? Kids have also been planned to assist with biodiversity studies. Kids. You scumbag industry. Well, the intention of including substantial estimates of kids into exposed natural homes, natural homes, and making them sleep around. This sounds about right for the nuclear industry, don't it? Maybe of dubious logical sense. Well, finally you said something I agree with. That's probably the first time in 2021 that somebody said something that actually made sense, a single sentence. Well, I can retire now. Finally, after a decade, somebody gave us a single line that was like, wow, what was that? The hell just happened to us? That's the strangest story I'm going to read in the next 2 hours a bit. Child's risk of cancer from radiation 10 to 100 times higher than an adult who had the same exposures. And the officials, United Nations, raised the limit 75 times higher than the other crazies at the World Health Organization, which is United Nations, recommended for children. You tell me that's a society? That's the nuclear industry. It's not Japan, it's the nuclear industry. Girls are having as much as twice as many thyroid lumps as boys. Twice as many, female population of all species. It's clear that low-level contamination is more dangerous than a single dose. Grasshoppers with deformed wings, grey eyes, not red. Birds with abnormal sperm, strange, large tumors. By the way, radiation and health experts, children with 11 becquerels a kilogram will start to see heart problem, permanent. It shows you how coward this industry is. It attacks the children and it refuses to stop doing it. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. They gave 70,000 children dosimeters rather than evacuate them. And the children can't read the dosimeter. It has to go to a university. I apologize. I love my ice. Radiation in small doses could actually be disproportionately worse, says the report. Doses spread over time might be more dangerous than doses given all at once. Renewed importance after Fukushima is right. Thyroid cancer exposures last your entire life. Leukemia risk peaks in a few years. It could do it in just a few meals from Japan. It can give you leukemia because your body is now saturated with white blood cells, which is leukemia, right? It's like killing, it's hypoxia too. It's like killing our own children. I cannot allow it to happen. Teachers forcing students to eat food parents fear is contaminated with radiation. And the parents are called scumbags, fearmongers, for asking for documentation that is not from a nuclear wasteland. The nuclear industry is insane. It's out of control. It's insane. It's now the biggest cult and death cult and secret society and organized crime unit on the planet. Period. It's even bigger organized crime than the militaries around the planet. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of Fukushima girls tested up to age 11 to 15, for goodness sakes. 55%. At least it looks like 55% from here. Fukushima girls have 3 times more thyroid cysts than boys larger sizes. 79% more medium-sized tumors than boys. So what you're seeing is a lot of documentation that the female population, which is going to be applicable to all species, because humans aren't the only ones affected. Every species, all the pets, all the animals, all the birds, all the little insects, all the ecosystem itself, all that little habitat is all brutalized permanently by this pulsing, invisible, radioactive fallout. It's the same thing for the ocean, right? So when you look at the ocean, Fukushima fallout covers the ocean from the surface all the way to the ocean floor. Pulsing energy. That was just in the first couple of weeks. I showed you the fallout, didn't I? That's not the one I wanted to show you, but which one is that? We'll get to it. So the radioactive fallout plumes, airborne, pulsing energy every second. Radioactive fallout plumes in the oceans, plus the Atlantic, pulsing energy every second. Radiation is covering the entire planet and pulsing energy permanently for millions of years every second at the speed of light. You know how much energy it takes to make something go to the speed of light? That's the thing with nuclear, with those atoms. When they're ionized, when they're made larger through this process, that's basically all that's really happening, is they're making these things larger, and then that's the easy way of looking at it. Now they're ionized, right? That's a simple way of looking at it. Just 0.8% of children in 2001 had thyroid tumors developing. 36% in a Fukushima study. Fukushima children with rashes, nosebleeds, diarrhea, and fatigue are blamed on radiation phobia of mothers. And there's so many stories like this, ridiculous. Over 35% of young people tested have thyroid tumors forming. Japanese foreign minister stopped claiming the food is safe. And in another study, 13,646 children at less than 40,000 have thyroid tumors developing. Which is, it should take a couple of decades for it to develop, see? This is 2012, for goodness sakes. And think about Chernobyl, which was nothing compared to Fukushima, but it's still brutal. And I mean brutal, but it's nothing compared to Fukushima's tonnage, right? Fukushima is just a tonnage is absurd we're talking about. But Chernobyl is brutal. Under 3% of children exposed to Chernobyl radiation while in the womb were diagnosed as healthy by the age of 7. There's a statistic. And Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000 United Nations podium said 3 million children require treatment because of Chernobyl. Many will die prematurely. Columbia medical professional inhaling just a single one hot particle. Everything from a nuclear meltdown is a hot particle. Can cause cancer, but cancer is one of 1,800 illnesses to show up, right? That's the neptunium dispersals from TEPCO's models. Covering the planet in neptunium. I showed you one from plutonium. I showed you another one for xenon-133. Another one for cesium. Of these invisible plumes heating up the planet every second. So lots of academics have showed that a single atom could cause you adverse, permanent health problems. Cesium immediately damages the heart muscles. It does this to animals and birds too, by the way. And mammals and insects. When radioactive cesium enters the body, 75% of it gets pumped up to the heart and sequesters in the heart. Xenon also is known to bombard the lungs and cause lung cancers with powerful X-rays. There's a lot of it, see? Right, this is the xenon-133 plume. So you got so much in your body, it's pulsing at the same time at the speed of light. They hit each other, then they change direction at the speed of light. Creates this X-ray effect. This is what they're talking about there. It's Brahmsen lung, which is it's a German word. I butchered it probably. Who cares? But anyway, it causes this X-ray effect it translates to braking. So they're pulsing at the speed of light, multiple atoms in your body hitting each other and changing direction. And the atoms are very hot atoms. They burn a hole right through your lung. And then they sequester in your bones, those in particular, and they radiate your stem cells. Tritium rain to result from disposal of Fukushima contaminated water. May interest to know radioactive rainfall occurs around all nuclear power plants during normal operation. So this is why and one of the signs of that is see a bigger populations of males than females within 50 kilometers of a nuclear power plant. But if you start looking deeper, you see heart problems, liver problems, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. You see this incredible proliferation of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Because cancer is usually latent, right? But if you go to where you won't see these same discrepancies in the populations. We got to stop these sorts of reports coming out. The international conference warns that the media talk of Fukushima is fucking up the nuclear industry. Shit, did I just say that? That was Geraldine Thomas from the United Kingdom. Incredible degenerate scum murderer who radiates children for a hobby, apparently. Fukushima workers transported to hospital in bad shape after working at the number 2 reactor. You ain't doing jack shit at number 2 because you got number 3 on one side, number 1 on the other side. It's a lethal dose. Scumbags. Before Fukushima, 100 becquerels of cesium is nuclear killer machine. After, no, just go ahead, yeah, you eat it up. You'll get some more. You want another plate? They kill you a long time. Children's health problem increase, incurable stomach aches, chest pains, nosebleeds that don't stop, diarrhea. Australia went on the warpath last night, I noticed. Just a couple of medias, right? They're nuclear-friendly media, obviously. Every 2 weeks, they're out there going crazy, pushing for nuclear power. Even though legislation says you can't have nuclear power in Australia. The scumbag nuclear industry is out there bullshitting and lying to the population. What do you call it, carbon-free or something? Otherwise, the planet will face a catastrophe if Australia don't get their nuclear toys to play with. The same catastrophe that is just around the corner for decades. The stubbornly has never come. Oh, it came, baby. It's here right now. All the whales are emaciated, all the birds are emaciated, all the insects are disappear. When was the last time you looked up in the sky and seen a flock of birds, migratory birds flying by? You didn't, did you? There's no spiders in the woods on the east coast of Canada or the west coast. We've done the research. Try wrapping your mind around that one. By the way, these plumes is global warming, moron, and you better deal with it. Plants need carbon to grow, right? Get rid of all the carbon, plants will disappear too. Morons. The reason nothing is ever enough for the climate cult. Really? You think nuclear is not a cult? It's not a climate cult. You created a climate cult so that people can't find people like me because I don't have that nonsense narrative. State electricity company South Korea got 1.3 megawatt solar power plant using idle structures of the buildings. So parts of the buildings that are not going to get used were turned into solar panels. $86 million. I'm sorry, no. The company got 13,723 square meters. We'll get there. So 1.3 megawatts is enough to power about 1,300 households. So there's another company who's going to spend 86 million. So when you scale that up, which is 46 times, you get 60,000 homes. If you spend $10 billion, it's 7 million people's homes could be powered by renewables. And $10 billion that would be a cheap nuclear power plant. You'd be like, what? It only cost you $10 billion? That's amazing. What the hell? We'll never do that again. But $10 billion of renewables, like South Korea just used, is 7 million homes. Nuclear power can't power 7 million homes for the same price. Not done the math. There it is. 6 slaves who didn't get COVID shots. Right, they got to keep the lie going strong, right? So that's what the COVID shots are all about. They want their $60 a jab. Monday was the first vaccine mandate deadline. They got 11,000 workers. These are mostly homeless and destitute and victims of society. So Hanford, they dumped 450 billion gallons of nuclear waste directly into the soil. They currently got 41 miles of unlined trenches there of nuclear waste too. But all you hear about is the tanks, right? You really think 100 tanks take up 585 square miles? Do you really? Huh? Do you? Our electricity demand, that's because COP26 climate summit with the kooky corporation known as United Nations is coming up on November the 10th in bird brain land. So they're going to have the climate summit down there, and the United Kingdom's like, we're going nuclear. No, nobody's taking credit for it. It just magically shows up in all the media, but no one's said, well, we got to go nuclear, and there's no public speaker. Again, there is no person in the nuclear industry that they can roll out, and reporters can put a chummy up to their mouth and have them on mainstream TV. It's never going to happen. There's none of them with a personality. That's the one thing you noticed a long time ago. Pre-Fukushima, there was nobody out there with a personality in the nuclear industry. Nobody. Our electricity demand is shifting into high gear. That's why we need diverse energy sources. Guest columnists. Whenever you get the word guest column, you know they're going to be a cuckoo. Non-sound notion is taking hold. Imagine depending on wind and solar power for all the electricity we need. Many politicians and environmental leaders argue that the Americans' future demand for electricity is expected to soar all the way up until November the 10th. As motorists get behind the wheel, electric cars can't be satisfied through renewables, which is sheer nonsense. Which can be satisfied through renewables is sheer nonsense, I tell you. Fortunately, there was enough base load generation to keep the lights on and air conditioners and dehumidifiers humming in homes and businesses, thanks to nuclear kooky power. I don't know why they gave us that picture. The nation's fleet of nuclear plants operate around the clock, poisoning our communities 24/7. Automakers have made a major commitment for electric vehicles in an effort to combat climate change. They don't get paid unless you write down climate change a certain amount of times in each story. It doesn't matter if they're talking about hockey or they're talking about traffic jams. It don't matter. They've got to put in global climate change or they're not getting paid, right? Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. It is global climate change, morons. Just a happy moron. Dun, 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 dun. Climate change gonna get you. Get you. Oh, looks like I smurfed that up, didn't I? The hell, Dana? Don't touch shit. I'll fix it after. That'll teach me. Climate change. An effort to combat climate change. Solar and I'll fix it. I'll get back. See, I actually got a button that lets me go back, but I didn't click it. It's the oh shit button, right? Oh, it doesn't show up over there. Hang on, I'll figure it out. Somewhere around right there, was it? I'll do it right there, see how that works for us. Solar and wind doesn't blow around the clock and the sun isn't always shining. We do hear that excuse constantly. You have pumped hydro, can deliver 100% renewables. Now, I know this is going to sound scary to all the nuclear scientists out there and engineers, but you're going to pump water uphill. So you got to come up with a pump. I don't know if they got those things on this planet. I've seen some on Mars. Maybe we should build a ship and fly to Mars and see how they done it. Pump water up a hill with excess energy from geothermal or tidal power or compressed air storage. You can compress air with excess energy down into a tunnel at 120 psi. Or you can have both of them. That's a pretty big win, you ask me. So you have storage. It's been around a long time. They're not substitute for base load power, but that is substitute for base load power. Pumped compressed air and then pumped hydro. That's storage on a large scale. By the way, new wind and solar. Last year, renewables on the planet was equal to 300 nuclear power plants. Can you build 300 power plants in 12 months? Huh? Can you, scumbags? Environmentalists, however well-intentioned in their quest to increase the use of solar and wind, ignore a fundamental principle of electricity production. It must be reliable. Yeah, we heard you the first 24 times, dear pinhead. Wind and solar are intermittent and unpredictable. Really? You never said that before, I noticed. Well, why not have pumped hydro, so you can store energy, and compressed air? You can have both, you know. You don't have to have one or the other. You got lots of money. You can do both. Well, Dana, we got to dig a hole in the ground. How the hell are we going to do that? We got to, we can't do stuff like that. That's hardcore, Dana. We can't do that. Reliable baseload from nuclear power are needed on the days when the weather isn't cooperating, because large-scale electricity storage on the grid is not yet available. Well, actually it is. You twerp, you scumbag. Because large-scale electricity storage on the grid is not available yet, Dana. Really? You never considered that even trying? Or you would have come up with that, right? It would be a tremendous leap of faith to think that it will become available anytime soon. So shut up. Well, actually, you can pump water up a hill with excess electricity when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. You got all the base load electricity you want. You only need 6 hours for base load. And you can store weeks at a time in these scenarios, right? You have no wind for 2 weeks right there, no wind for 3 weeks right here. If you choose. You can pump all that water into a nuclear power plant, but you can't take excess energy and pump water. And there's 500,000 spots they found worldwide. Stop Sizewell sea campaigners. Take message to the Prime Minister. So there's another nuclear plant they're building in the United Kingdom. Look how carbon-free that place is. Is that not carbon-free? Dana, you're a fearmonger, and of course that's carbon-free. Well, I don't know, man. I think they use enough cement you can build a sidewalk from there to Rome. They got every piece of precious metal left in the United Kingdom. Everything. There were people that needed prosthetic legs and you couldn't get the material because this place here sucked it all up. Don't buy Sizewell C either. Too damaging, too costly, too risky, and too late. Yeah, for starters, the numbers is absurd how much it costs to build a plant down there. Because there's so many kickbacks and so many thieves, right? But this is another reactor site. And I can't remember the name for some reason off the top of my head. Not that it matters. Look at the natural resources they're going through. It's going to take them a couple of decades to build it. $30 billion. And it's surrounded. Same as Sizewell C, is going to be surrounded. As far as you can see in the background, farms. That's the most... the next poll will be, should all nuclear plants in farmlands be shut down? Because there will be no nuclear left on the planet, right? Get it? They're lunatics, boy. And girls and folks. Leading the world to net zero means aiming for 100% renewables with a flexible grid backed by storage and energy efficiency. Please don't buy Sizewell C. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, because you can store electricity by pumping water up a hill. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but you can do it compressed air and pumping water up a hill. Store your energy for anything. Nuclear is, you got to run it at full speed, 24 hours a day. You can't slow it down. And if it runs away, you run away. A spokeswoman, they always do that, don't they? For Sizewell C said the net zero strategy makes clear the key role that the net zero strategy. Because they're all in on this, right? This was the Paris Accord, and the idea was they know the planet's heating up because of Fukushima, so the strategy was each year we'll ramp the rhetoric up for a number of years, and as we start seeing mass die-offs, then we'll start screaming, we gotta stop the carbon. And the animals and insects and birds and humans and plants can't survive without carbon, by the way. But by then they get you all poisoned and you're on your way out, see? We are pleased the government bootlick and lapdog, is planning to introduce legislation for the RAB funding model, which is where they charge people up front to pay for the reactors before they build them. So it'll take them 10 years to raise the money. They'll just raise your bills. Oh, no, that's the RAB model, so we can fund the newer reactors. So you guys got to pay for it, but we can't get any money for it, so we're just going to take it. We're going to force you to pay for it early, before it's even built. That's terrifying. They built it in a agricultural community, like all nuclear power plants. So the radiation lands there, a lot of it, and poisons you because you eat the food. That doesn't terrify you? It should. You need to wake up, okay? Aging nuclear reactors. This is Press TV, but the video wouldn't work. I couldn't find the video at their site. And so they talk about all reactors in America are mostly 40-year-old or older. And that they don't think these reactors are safe in America anymore, or any country that has old reactors like that. And they're 100% right. The reason the original charter for nuclear power plants was 30 years because of the Wigner effect, the bombardment of neutrons and X-rays and gamma shines. To cut carbon emissions, Germany needs to keep nuclear plants open and close the coal plants. This was done by a Finnish non-for-profit research company called Think Atom. They're not evil. That's a pro-nuke. That's a lobbyist. It's a nuke lobbyist called Think Atom. And they done a study saying you need more nuclear. Wow. That's amazing. Thank goodness you guys exist. Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. This is a model based on venting, not based on the actual releases on top of that. These models need to be updated. If they were updated, it'd be just one color. There'd be no lines visible. Like, it's not a game. Germany still has 6 operating nuclear reactors, but they were all scheduled to close down next year. Despite being a major source of low-carbon electricity for the scumbags, it's not low carbon. It can never be low carbon. You can't power 1 million homes and call it low carbon. It doesn't. It releases energy. So the energy that is used first, the problem is the rods become fragile, but it still has the energy, but you can't use it anymore, so you put it in a pool to cool down. And what I mean by that is, it's still splitting the atoms that it needed to power 1 million homes when you put it in the pools for decades. That energy is released all day long for 1 million homes, and that goes out there forever, pulsing energy of 1 million homes. But tomorrow, it's going to release the same energy it would normally release for 1 million homes, but instead of being contained or semi-contained, there's no containment. So these isotopes are released, ionized atoms are released into the environment. Now they're pulsing energy for millions of years also. Do you get how this actually works? And there's 440 fuel holding tanks with no containment that are vented all day long into the environment that are pulsing energy every second, creating plumes exactly like this permanently till the end of time. And this ionizing radiates all the litter in the forest, all the species, sterilizes them in increments over a decade or so, and you start to see a noticeable shift and decrease in populations. So they try to cover up. Oh, the fish are moving north now after 100,000 millenniums of doing the same migratory routes. No, they're gone somewhere else, Dana. They're not dead. Germany still has 6 operating reactors. Now the problem, like Germany didn't get rid of the nuclear because they were stupid. Merkel actually had a degree in nuclear. And She's seen the pollution cover the entire planet, but brutally decimate Japan. And she informed her compatriots, her little cult, and they pulled the plug on nuclear because they realized an accident can destroy our countries. The nuclear industry is very powerful, so they attacked her every day, all day, relentlessly, in order to scare away any other country that was thinking about doing the moral and ethical thing. Germany walked away from nuclear because they didn't want to destroy their country with an accident, like Japan had done. And they didn't want to poison their population and pretend it's not happening and destroy their health and the integrity and the genetics of their country. The report highlights Germany has so far achieved little in efforts to develop and deploy low-carbon energy. So this Paris Accord is where the low-carbon narratives come from, right? It all dates back to the Paris Accord. That's used to bludgeon any opposition with. You're not reducing your low-carbon. Yeah, because we want plants to grow, scumbag. Germany, to meet its own targets, had to rapidly cut its carbon emissions. No, that's the attack mode. You're not cutting your carbon emissions. You got to keep your nuclear power, scum. This could only be achieved if the nuclear shutdown policy was abandoned. Please! That's what they're doing, right? This is an attack. The whole story is about attacking Germany, trying to bully them into keeping a nuclear. Given that we need to act very fast and reduce emissions significantly in the 2020s. First off, you couldn't care less, you despicable coward, or you'd walk away from nuclear right away. You think carbon, gas, and coal or oil, gas, coal, or oil has emissions that cover the whole planet and pulse energy every second for millions of years? No, right? Nuclear, scum, degenerate, coward, monster, hideous, death cult, and secret society nuclear does. Vicious, hateful cowards in nuclear do. Cowards. Not a bunch of cowards. Everybody who works in the industry is just incredible cowards. You don't see them coming out and challenging my narrative. They got their attack dogs, but that's it. But they're not legitimate. They're trash. 1 billion tons. This was a non-profit report, which they paid for, right, and promoted nuclear. Not renewables, but nuclear. It is highly risky and irresponsible towards future generations to try and solve the climate challenge without one of the most capable technologies we have at our disposal. We're trying to turn the people. This is tactics like in the 60s, the Cold Wars, this was the propaganda you seen back then, where countries that they were going to invade for oil, they would attack leaders in that country subversively with leaflets and with people resistance, their own resistance, their controlled opposition on street corners, passing out pamphlets also. Free press, right? And it would show up wherever the poor people were congregating and cause a divide in the country. And then when you had a divide and the country was unstable, then they would invade it. That's the tactic, right? You'll also see the same tactic in the art of war, because all of these leaders worldwide, or these appointed puppet leaders worldwide, are required to read The Art of War. It's a 3,000-year-old book on how to invade a population and win them over. Take them over, I should say. International Energy Agency, wishing for a cushy job down the road at the nuclear industry, has established that extending the operational life of existing nuclear reactors was the most cost-effective option for production of low carbon. Now, that's taken completely out of context. They said they had the option, had encouraged countries to do so, which is not what they done at all. Well, that's simply not what was said, you scumbags. Plant growth requires a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide. For starters, And more nuclear is not going to fix what nuclear has already got done. Covered the planet in fission products, airborne and all the way to the ocean floors, pulsing energy every second. Should the United States clean up the Bikini Atolls? That's the latest and greatest poll we got here tonight. And we got 83% of 35 votes. So people don't think they should clean up the Bikini Atoll. Well, why not? Who voted no? Let's hear it. How come they shouldn't clean up the nuclear waste? How does that work? Why wouldn't you want to clean up the nuclear waste? Why would anybody vote no? No, don't clean up the nuclear waste. Let them die, Dana. This is what I mean, right? This is the nuclear industry is like that. They see that, they're like, why clean up our own mess? No! No! That's what happened. Plants can't grow without carbon dioxide. They use it in greenhouses, hence the greenhouse effect, carbon dioxide. They just switched it around, and all of a sudden now, carbon dioxide bad. You stupid, carbon dioxide bad. Quest to find site for nuclear waste disposal in the United Kingdom? Why is he laughing? Why has he got a big stupid smile on his face for? So one of the places is Seascale, which is right alongside of Sellafield, ongoing nuclear meltdown surrounded by farms. Seascale, why would you put a nuclear waste site in Seascale? Oh, they want to do it under the ocean. Portfolio holder for nuclear and corporate services, Shithead Moore said, I think our community is probably the most nuclear savory community in the whole country. We'd love to have all the nuclear waste pumped right there in this little community. He's the portfolio holder for nuclear. He's not pro-nuclear at all, that fella. 80% of nuclear waste will likely be stored in underground facilities will be from nuclear waste site known as one of the most radioactive places in Europe called Sellafield. Oh, and Seascale, a community that's already plagued by cancer clusters and illnesses and diseases. But they want to put it under the ocean, off the coastline. So when the ocean finally collapses in it, make sure to kill the ocean. I'm not kidding you. That's why they're doing it. That's why they want to do that. You'll see that happening all over the place. They know it'll detonate at some point because they're not going to store it. They're not going to try to store it right. And what I mean by that is you would have a contest with 1,000 universities in your country to come up with a solution, right? And you probably get 10 that were beautiful, absolute, brilliant ideas from the contest. Actually, we're talking about captured universities, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Just normally, if the nuclear industry hadn't destroyed all of our universities, we could get 1,000 universities to have a contest. Do without nuclear in France. It's impossible, according to a network of nuclear lapdogs. They show you a farm right alongside a nuclear power plant. Because they love you so much. No need to build nuclear reactors or even to start the EPR of Flameville, described as a major industrial failure. And by closing the old reactor between 40s and 50 years, the electricity systems can't do without the atom while ensuring security of supply via the storage and management of electrical flexibility generated by renewables. Wow, I didn't see that coming, did you? I was making fun, right, when I started off. I apologize if anybody mistook me. The atom today produces more than 70% of the current in France. Of course, France gets their uranium from Niger, where they created the Civil War 60-something years ago, destroyed millions of families and children's and everybody's lives in that country, got rid of or funded and armed opposition to the government, so they have no functional administration or whatsoever in the country. Then they invaded the country with an actual army, and they're still there today with an army, a sophisticated army that puts down any oppression immediately, and have impoverished the country now for over 60 years, enslaved the country, literally and figuratively, so they can get cheap uranium for their reactors in France. It's called a place called Niger. It's not that far from France when you think about it. But think about how evil they are to continue to do that. Really green environmentalists. Yes, Australia. You're saying we should go to nuclear to save the planet. It's a real green environment. This is another thing we're seeing with the nuclear industry more and more and more, is pro-nuclear communities and lobbyists are creating all of these organizations like progressive environmentalists or real green environmentalists, and they call themselves activists on top of that, and they promote nuclear. And it's carbon free, right? Yeah, it's carbon free, Dana. You see them like, if you're talking to them in person, they're literally vibrating, right? They're lobbyists. They're all supposed to be put down when they're born, but we stopped doing it apparently. Real green environmentalists are saying we should go nuclear to save the planet. This is Australia gone crazy. Sky News host Chris Kenny says a lot of really green environmentalists are saying Australia should go nuclear to save the planet. And every man and his dog has an opinion on net zero by 2050. No, they don't. Well, they might, because the media's got them, the nuclear control media worldwide has got them just, there's a word for it, fixated on it, because they're bombarded with propaganda, saturation level for decades now. But specifically since the Paris Accord, they've now gone into terrorist mode. The only country that can go close to net zero and do so with a lot of nuclear power is Australia, which sells uranium. There's a couple of exceptions. Norway with its hydro and New Zealand with its hydro. But most countries, you need nuclear to get there. Nuclear is not carbon free, you terrorists. You scumbag terrorists. Nuclear is not carbon free. Nuclear has radiated the entire planet, terrorists. Fukushima radioactive fallout is pulsing energy every second, heating up the planet, not carbon. How the hell does carbon heat up a planet? Gas, oil, and coal doesn't pulse energy every second, heating up the planet. Now, Yucca Mountain, they actually spent $20 billion. $20 billion on litigation. $20 billion on litigation alone. Try wrapping your mind around that. And what you got there now is all decrepit and rusted, decades old, decades past its usefulness. The soap portal, the 5 tunnel. Look at all the rust, my God, boy. Federal investigative report on nuclear waste disposal recommending Congress amend the decades-old law designating Yucca Mountain as the sole location for disposal and allow other sites to do it. You shouldn't allow interim, and permanent spent fuel storage in other states. Like, you got to get it out of the environment because it's pulsing atoms, ionizing radiated atoms into our environment at an unsustainable amount. If you never had Fukushima meltdown, all the fuel pools will kill us because they're releasing so many atoms. When people say you haven't got a solution for nuclear waste, they don't understand what they're talking about. They don't articulate it anyway. The problem is the toxicity, that because this is how they confuse it. Oh, it's toxic, Dana. Yeah, but what do you mean, though? I'm not going near the nuclear plant. It's not toxic to me. Oh, that's right. Okay, have a nice day. No, it's hemorrhaging out of the fuel pools. Hang on, I'll show it to you. There's a couple of issues with this. One is it goes airborne and it circles the planet. The same as anthropogenic pollution will travel through the jet streams and the corridors. It'll do the same, right? But all power plants, except for, I shouldn't say all, but the majority of them, have this one really weird function. Oh, what the hell, eh? Here we go. We're not gonna. Now, first off, this picture here is a model of one of the new Sizewell C. So it's not Sizewell C because it doesn't exist yet, right? But here's the original draft, and you can see it's surrounded by farms. And then they done that version, because this is just a model, but it's surrounded by farms. So a very tiny amount of radiation exposure is deadly for children of all species, not just humans. So when you have endless nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, as far as you can see, that's not an accident. When every single plant is built in a spot to poison food and people, that's not an accident. When the majority of plants are surrounded, as far as you can see, by farms, that's called an agenda. And that's a scary agenda, because if you eat that food, you can have leukemia or heart problems or liver or lung or respiratory or pituitary or thyroid or adrenaline. You can have 1,800 illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. And you can die, plus cancers, all kinds of different cancers. And then they'll take you to a hospital and they'll murder you with radiation. And you don't see what I'm saying? It doesn't resonate for this planet? You're going to eat the food, radioactive food, get sick, now you're going to go to the hospital, and you're going to sign a piece of paper saying you can kill me if you want to. Just don't bore me. You'd think that that's an accident, that they built all these nuclear power plants in communities surrounded by farms. And same thing with the repositories. They're going to build them in farmlands. They don't want the farms to stop. They want the farmers to keep working. We actually had them say that here in Canada earlier this year. Now, the thing about this is, they're not stupid. They actually know that radiation is sucked up by grapes and strawberries and wheat and tomatoes, and they know that you can't escape the radiation airborne, but let's poison you, because a lot of the heavy particles, and so they know about these studies, so they also know that the heavy particles are going to fall close by, and if they start bioaccumulating, then activists might find it, and that's a reason to close down the site. So they purposely built them in these facilities, and as closest to the water as they can, so that they can, every time it rains, a lot of the radiation will wash down into the river from all the farmlands, so don't bioaccumulate too much there. But they want it that way. This is not an accident that all your nuclear power plants are built. It's not an accident that they radiated the entire ocean. Now your storms are going over a hot ocean, or bigger, vicious, more violent storms. They know all this. And they knew it was going to happen after Fukushima. They had the models. And they knew this was going to cause global warming. And so now, one of the theories I worked on was the carbon capture. Remember how they pushed that originally after the nuclear meltdown? That was one of the first things they were pushing. The carbon capture, my take on it was they wanted to sequester it away for, in case this went really bad, they wanted to sequester it away for their own greenhouses. In case they had to go underground in the future or something, they would have all this carbon and they could take it underground or take it to Mars or whatever the case may be, right? Because if they can establish a base on Mars, they will send fleets of ships with carbon to the planet, right? So they can live in luxury up there. The nuclear industry is in no opposition on the planet whatsoever. Just a few activists like myself out there and researchers like myself out there putting up an educational program. I'm probably the only one that does a full educational program on the entire planet. And so we need a lot more people to do it. The idea of me, what I'd done was, I said, I'll go overboard and I'll run a great operation. We'll get lots of people educated and they'll start producing material, and then people that watch them will start producing material. And you got an actual resistance, right? It didn't happen though. And so I'm forced to keep going like a good slave. We got no choice, right? We can't, because we have so few people out there, nobody's really doing educational programs. I don't have a right to stop. I don't have a right to take a break. I don't have a right to slack off. I have a responsibility to always get up and get busy. Like I can't sleep in, I can't do this and I can't do that. I have to concentrate on this all day, every day, and hope that we inspire enough people to have a resistance, because if not, we're in real trouble. And, worst case scenario was that foundations would fund me and I would just build a big organization, and that would be it. For the rest of my life, we would just curb stomp the industry. That didn't happen because the foundations were all captured by the nuclear industry and then were weaponized against people like me. Oh, poor Dina. No, I'm just saying this is a problem. And so the educational programs are hopefully to reach policymakers and investors so that at least we damage the industry one way or another, right? So I had to become more lucid and no more goofing around. Nevada lawmakers who have opposed burying nuclear waste for commercial power plants. So they're talking about Yucca Mountain before I went off in that long spiel. Even future nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. That's a whole different level of hate right there, man. Well, the problem with Yucca Mountain was how much heat could the mountain contain for 200 years? That was the original equation, right? So at one point they were going to fill the mountain up with air conditioners to keep the mountain cool. This is how crazy the nuclear industry actually is. And you can't have it anywhere else. It's got to be Yucca Mountain. But Nevada doesn't even have a nuclear reactor. But somebody better take it, and somebody better find something to do with it properly, because we can't have it hemorrhaging into our environment. All the casts are vented. All the fuel poles have no containments, are vented. Every time they change the reactor fuel, they have to open it up, and all that is vented. That's why they bring in 1,000 outside workers, right, when they change the fuel, because they don't want the statistics showing up in their employees. The transient workers they bring in aren't going to be statistically counted. Andrew Forrest dreams up wild reasons why Australia shouldn't touch nuclear. Besides the fact that Yucca Mountain is on an earthquake fault, as we found out last year, right? You can't do it. It's just a bad place, unfortunately. But do something. You got to come up with a solution. You can't keep leaving it at the surface, venting into the environment forever. That's the opposite. First off, their original charter said nothing will be released into the environment. And this is all they do 24/7. And the more fuel that you burn at a nuclear plant, the more fuel pool material you have accumulated, the more splitting of the atom every 24 hours you're seeing. So every 2 years, there's more fuel going into pools, which means more hemorrhaging radiation into our saturated environment already. It's evil what's going on. All the dumping, all the hidden nuclear disasters like Santa Susana, 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was brutal, man. 3 Mile Island was actually brutal. And they hid that one away. Arnie Gunnarsson and Lake Barrett, when you stop looking after 3 Mile Island, they boil off millions and millions of gallons of lethal radiation in the water into the environment. It took them like 2 years. They made a fortune too. If you really want zero emissions, you got to get a big fucking ice pick and stick it in everything pro-nuclear out there in their fucking heads. Excuse the language. News about Sintos in the link up to advanced nuclear energy. That story disappeared. And Poland, I found it in another spot. Small modular reactors, right? And so this narrative for the small modular reactors, they're actually going to be breeder reactors. They're going to be using reclaimed uranium, reclaimed plutonium. They're going to be using mixed oxide fuel. That's the genesis behind these reactors. It's why they'll have so much energy. It's because you're using this incredibly lethal fuel, and they're going to release the hot particles back into the environment because you don't have a storage solution because they're not trying. They can come up with a solution, but they won't even try. They're in the whole industry, right? That's what I mean. Like the inbreeds of the inbreeds of the inbreeds. The current generation of this death cult and secret societies, they're inbreeds. These are lunatics. They're lazy too, on top of that. They have no incentive to do anything good because there's no accountability if they don't do anything good. There's no incentive for them not to be evil. And it's easy to be evil because that's in their inbreeding genetics. And help Poland achieve its goal for decarbonization. And then what are the plants going to eat if you get rid of all the decarbon? Carbon doesn't pulse energy every second, pinhead. You can't use the word decarbonization. The word is get rid of the radiation, sequester the radiation from the environment. All right? Okay? Plutonium disposal efforts at Savannah River site. The Savannah River, not the site now, but the river, downriver from Savannah, they were dredging last year and they had to stop dredging because they ran into a whole bunch of 45-gallon drums of cesium-137. Who knows what else was really there? But they admitted that the barrels were full of at least cesium-137. Savannah River site, literally in the old years, they would just dump the barrels in the river. And then if they didn't sink, they would shoot them. So all the big heavy rainstorms and stuff washed a lot of the barrels miles downriver, right? From the floor. Gets a boost. Now, they're on one of the world's biggest aquifers on top of that. That's highly contaminated. The National Nuclear Security Administration now targeting fiscal year 2026 for the startup capabilities will speed the removal of metric tons of plutonium. They got around 11 metric tons or something. There's a large sense of urgency to get it done. You know what they're going to do with it? They're going to package it and ship it to WIP. You know, where they spent $2 billion to clean up that salt truck tire. They had a salt truck tire that caught fire. They abandoned 55 caverns, football field-sized caverns, abandoned at WIP, and for over 2 years. And he blamed it on a truck fire. The front tire caught fire, or the rear driver's tire caught fire. So they couldn't go back down for 10 days because of a truck fire. And then it cost $2 billion to clean up the truck fire. It was actually over $6 billion that they took, so I don't know why they say it was only $2 billion. They want to bring in hot boxes, glove boxes. This is where they, the boxes with the remote control tools, articulating arms with 3 feet thick lead glass, stuff like this. And so then they boil it in 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures of acid and separate it. And a lot of that gets vented up those big stacks. That's what they're for. So it lands in the farms, covers the farms. It's dilute and dispose strategy. The alternative to the floundered mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility. Well, they spent almost $20 billion, 18 or something billion, on that mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility, which is illegal, by the way, in America. If they finally gave up on it, after they stole 18 billion, the greedy, they're a parasite on all society. I can't believe that nobody hold them accountable. They're just parasites. They're going to ship it to the waste isolation pilot plant. But first off, the package and everything is vented right there. And anybody downstream of Savannah River site is getting sick because of it. Then they're going to put it on trucks and ship it across the country. It's vented the whole time. This stuff is still splitting the atom the whole time as you're driving across the country, releasing incredible amounts of radiation. It's going to be surrounded by security and police, and they're going to get overtime and cancer and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism for their children. Nuclear dumps by the riverside. Threat to Savannah River from the radioactive contaminations at the degenerate Department of Energy Savannah River site. It's contaminated as a result of highly contaminated surface water flowing in it from the Savannah River site, the Savannah River itself. To the large flow of river deluge, the contamination they claim to well within safe drinking water limits. Tritium, which by the way is used, when you use tritium in your nuclear missiles, you double their megawatts, their megatons, or they're megatons and kilotons. So tritium, by the way, of course, stays in the body for 11 years for each half-life decade. And the problem with tritium is that's tritiated water. It's absorbed immediately into your body readily and easily. And then it bombards your cells and your chromosomes. And if it's in your organ, it'll assimilate into your organ. It'll bombard that constantly with a very low emitter, but it's so much of it. It's an absurd amount of it. But the problem is, if it's from the Savannah River site, it's not tritium. It can't be just tritium. It's going to be completely saturated because there's incredible amount of waste at this site. So it's going to be saturated with all kinds of stuff. Tritium upgraded Savannah River site essential for the nuclear bomb refurbishment. But it is not harmful, Dana. Oh, okay. Deadly legacy. Savannah River site near Atkins is one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Every time it rains there, all of that water that runs into the river, because everything's running downhill towards the Savannah River, is incredibly polluted. That's a fact. Savannah River site occupies approximately 300 square miles. So between Savannah River site and Hanford site, the cleanup they estimated was $1.3 trillion. Covered that earlier this week, I think. Draft request for Savannah River, $21 billion. The coalition seeks an extra $7.25 billion for, cleanup and jobs for their kids for the summer, I suppose. Savannah River ash cleanup aims to protect the wetlands. Remember that story? They have coal plants there to run their nuclear reactors. Because, it's so carbon free, right? Coal is the cheapest. Australia is held back by the Labour Party on nuclear. No, Australia has legislation that says you can't have nuclear. And that is sedition to try to change that, by the way. Under the way that they're trying to do. The Mineral Council is mostly behind all of this. Deputy Prime Minister says Australia is being held back by Anthony Albanese on establishing nuclear power in the country. And if the Labour Party in a bipartisan way came forward as proper statesmen and women and said they support nuclear power, we would have a nuclear industry. Mr. Joyce told degenerate scumbags at Sky News, which is not Sky, it's not news, it's monsters. That's the nuclear industry, obviously, talking. And that would be a great outcome for our already radioactive nation. The British went down there and done their nuclear testing. They waited for the winds to blow across Australia. Then they set off their nuclear weapons. And the people that let them do it were these people's parents, apparently. There is no functional government in Australia. There's the nuclear industry. But we know the political tactics of the Labour left will just use as a mechanism to cut and dice us on fear tactics. Fear-mongering. Everybody's fear-mongering. How about you? Bill Gates says climate tech will... Now, Bill Gates started up that company, terrestrial... 8 to 10 Teslas at Google and Amazon and Microsoft. So if you invest in nuclear, it's the next Teslas, it's the next Google, it's the next Amazon, it's the next Microsoft, is what human hater is saying there. I know she's going to spend $15 million for his daughter to get married to that horse rider. The only thing stopping nuclear energy in Australia is politics. So Australia's gone crazy, isn't it? Every other story last night for a while was Australia. There are many liberals and nationals in the country who want to overturn our country's irrational ban on nuclear energy. Sky host Chris Kenny said nuclear energy is inevitable in Australia and all that is stopping it is politics. We're the world's third largest exporter of uranium, yet we won't use it ourselves. No, you have legislation not to poison your own country, just everybody else's, you piece of shit, you despicable coward, you ruthless little piece of shit, you. We're the world's third largest exporter of misery. We have to wonder how much longer degenerates in Australia can ignore a sensible debate about nuclear energy. A sensible debate? You've never had a single debate. I'll get on your show. I'll jump on your show. You call me. Go back to my videos. I always show my telephone number at the beginning of every show. You sacks of shit. I'll show you exactly what's going on. The bunker. Here's another story on Australia. The military-industrial inferiority complex. No, it's not. Where is it? The bunker. Oh yeah, nuclear energy debate needs to be discussed. It comes as a national leader. Joyce is set to hand PM Morrison his party's positions on net zero by today. Considering nuclear energy may actually be a part of the whole discussion, China is making that call. Same with India. Like trying to bully the country into taking nuclear. That's sedition what they're doing, right? They should be arrested and they should be locked away forever. We have one of the largest parts of uranium unmined on the planet. I'm not advocating either way, it just needs to be discussed. Problem is they won't have a discussion. They just have their rhetoric, their propaganda. We see it over and over and over, right? They wanted to put a nuclear dump in Kimba. And so they had a vote, but they wouldn't let the natives vote. And the community was fed propaganda that nuclear was like a banana, it was like walking in the sunshine, or it's as harmful as getting on an airplane, or sleeping next to somebody, or climbing a mountain. It was harmless. No facts whatsoever. No dissenting opinions whatsoever. So they had a vote. Now, the nuclear waste, Kimba is farmland. Prime farmland. And this is where they want to put a nuclear dump. Now, guess what the nuclear dump is? It's medical isotopes. medical equipment. So they murdered these people with radiation, and the stuff left over, they got to put it under in a deep geological repository. If it's so bad that it has to go into a deep geological repository, it can't cure a human or an animal, see? This is not rocket scientists. This is reality stuff. You've been hoodwinked now, and you use it in your hospital, therefore it must be safe, right? Well, ask 97% of the people that were murdered by it how safe it is. And we got the studies from Australia, by the way. I'll grab it. Australian-American study that was repeated several years back. Ooh, where do I put that to? I'll find it. There you are. Yeah, so the study, you can go look it up yourself, 3% efficiency chemotherapy treatment on cancer cure. Original study was 1985. It was repeated in 2004. The study showed it estimated 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the USA lived longer with it than without it. So the question was, why are we doing this to people? By the way, 3% is the typical misdiagnosis, where they hit you with all this radiation, but you actually didn't even have cancer in the first place. From an investment point of view, we are definitely part of that. We have one of the largest parts of uranium mine on the planet. Blah, 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 blah. Back to this story, secret U.S. nuclear missile bases were targeted by UFOs. And they want the Pentagon to come clean. This is people that worked at the bases, quite a few of them. There's the map of all the bases that were disabled when an unidentified flying object showed up at the bases. Disarmed the nuclear weapons. This is a very salacious story, yeah? If they're capable of doing that, they could have took over the planet too. Or they could have already introduced themselves. And so it's probably not true, but it could be true. Who don't? You can't rule anything out outside nuclear is evil. You can't rule that one out. Too much evidence to go against that one. Director General of Nuclear Lawyer Malaysia committed to murdering everyone. And with support and guidance, all countries can help murder their communities and the people in it by the IAEA. So radiation helps pollution. Radiation is pollution, for God's sakes. This is radiation covering the whole planet, poisoning the entire planet at the one time with a continuous plume. How is that hard to wrap your mind around, I wonder? Consortium to fast-track nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine plays a vital role with health care. 40 million victims a year. And targeted therapies to treat diseases like cancer. Really? Well, let's explore that. I got some studies. Introduction of radiation injuries, another silent epidemic. Radiation-induced injury to the visual pathway. So think of it this way. You're going to go get treated for a tumor at a hospital because you live close to a nuclear power plant. So now they're gonna just murder you with radiation. I'll show you what I mean. So they're gonna treat a tumor. It's right here, right here, around the old breastbone. Okay. So now you're gonna get radiation injuries to your eyeballs, radiation injury to your heart, radiation injury to your cardiac injuries because of breast cancer treatment. Radiation cardiac injuries because of, radiation-induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia because of radiation-induced lung injury. Blood-spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system injuries from radiation therapy. radiation-induced bowel injuries, radiation-induced kidney injuries, radiation-induced brain narcosis, radiation-induced rectal injuries, oh joy, radiation injury of the central nervous system and of the liver diseases, radiation-induced bile duct injuries, and brainstem injuries after radiation therapy, language decline after radiation therapy, brain tumor, recurring brain tumors from radiation injuries, radiotherapy, cognitive impairment in young patients because of radiotherapy, aging mass detection of radiation-induced brain injuries. So you'll go get rid of that tumor and get 55 more. Oh yeah, sign me up. Late radiation rectal injury. That's for me. Anything to help the nuclear industry, I tell you. Spain to phase out coal nuclear. They'll be losing their minds tomorrow in the nuclear industry. Did you hear that Spain's going to move out of nuclear? Let's get on. Let's get environmental progress on their case. Spain to phase out coal, oil, and gas. Nuclear is going to wake up tomorrow morning crying. Nuclear power, the eternal dream that cannot be killed. No, because it lasts for billions of years, you piece of shit. When the world's first nuclear power plant went online in Russia in June 1954. That's not what I heard. I heard it was in 1952 and it melted down in Chalk River, Canada. That's what I heard anyway. It's still melting down 72 years later. When the world's first nuclear power plant went online in Russia. Oh yeah, first power plant in Russia. Inexhaustible, clean, and cheap energy. I swear that if anybody ever says that to my face, I'll stretch their tongue about 6 inches away from the back of their head. In October 2020, U.S. Department of Energy announced it would support the construction of 2 new experimental nuclear reactors with $80 million. You can't even get the land for $80 million. What are you going to do with $80 million? They need to steal at least that in the first month. That's an insult to the nuclear industry. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying. As part of decarbonization of the U.S. economy. Let me show you how that actually works, sir. Decarbonization. Look at it. That's radioactive fallout from Japan. Take a great big breeder, breathe deeply. Yummy radiation. That's global warming, pulsing energy every second for tens of thousands of years. Sodium-cooled reactor for highly enriched uranium. Oh, like Santa Susana, right? People are lunatics by. Terror power, new scale, terrestrial energy. Want to reduce cost by building the reactors from small, standardized modulars. This is the incredible fable. They don't actually exist. Oh, they're going to be cheaper, safer. They're going to be make them in factories, Dana, and assembly line. Dun, 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 dun. It's nonsense. So, like the sodium reactors, if you introduce oxygen or water, they detonate. I mean, they detonate too. They detonate. By the way, NASA admits that humans can't pass the Van Allen radiation belt. Did you know that? Let me see. In Australia, I'm going to have to cover that on Monday. I have to cover that on Sunday. Cover that on Sunday. This is it. What is the nuclear EMC effect? Scientists shed a light on a physics-defying mystery. Nuclear science is many things. as powerful as potentially dangerous is ultimately still not understood by scientists. Well, that's reassuring. We're taught in schools that protons and neutrons make up the center of all atoms in the universe. What your science book did tell you is that the scientists have observed some peculiar and physics-defying traits of these subatomic particles that can't be explained by existing theories. So the neutrons would change shape, basically, to churn. Yes, 5,000 scientists, none of them working on Fukushima. So protons and neutrons are bound together by a force of about 8 million electron volts, where the quarks are held together by a force of about 100 million electron volts. And that's where it basically stops. It stops at the quarks, right? That's as far as they're able to get, is the quarks. And so string theory was postulated by quite a few out there as what's given the quarks the energy. And string theory is exactly that. It's a string and a theory. So you know how a guitar string vibrates, right? And so a string, you know, now, so the string can take any shape. It doesn't have to be a straight line. So it can be round, it can be deformed and round, it can be squiggly. It's a string, right? So, but if they all have this one property, the theory goes, they all vibrate. And that's the catalyst for it to have other interactions, right? It produces energy. And so it goes back to anthropogenic man-made atoms. What is the attribute about them that make them so unique? Well, they pulse energy at the speed of, almost the speed of light in every direction, continuously for extended millenniums, for thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years, depending on the specific type of element we're talking about, whether it's uranium or curium or plutonium or americium or neptunium or strontium or whatever. But scientists have only made as far as quarks. They haven't been able to wrap their mind around, is that the end of it? But they think there's going to be particles inside of that also. Right? But the theory of everything now is the string theory, where everything is basically driven by these little strings that can take on any shape, and they have energy, sustained energy. But that's actually what the problem with nuclear was. It has this incredible energy every second, right? So they should be trying to come up with a solution for nuclear releases into the environment and all that, and they might actually solve this equation while they're doing it, is all I'm saying. It can happen. But that's my take on what is this EMC effect. What is that effect? Like, first off, in the real environment is not gravity for this stuff, right? The real environment is space. The space dust is what they're really talking about, yeah? The atoms from space are different in one sense than the atoms. They're restricted, because in space, they don't have any resistance, whereas on Earth, they have a gravity resistance. They have a atmospheric pressure resistance. It's different. Right, and so the reason, I'll just end it on this, is like, the reason fusion works in space is because there's no resistance. So when the stars have too much energy, they're able to fling out particles that interact with our solar system, or our entire solar system, but also our atmosphere. We see it as spectacular light shows in certain conditions at certain times, right? That's emissions from our sun, fusion, throwing energy out. But we can't replicate it here on Earth in a tin can, in a jar or wherever, right? So fusion on Earth is a pipe dream. It doesn't work on Earth because we have gravity, we have atmospheric pressures, and if you get rid of all of that, you have an unsustainable environment now where it needs to be able to blast the excess of its thing into away from it, so it doesn't come back in on it. Right? That's why the sun works the way it does. It's able to expel the excess and keep the symmetrical engine working, basically. It's a big engine. That's all it really is. And it's like every other engine. Alrighty then. We'll give it up. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Because we can't take a day off. You got to keep the pressure on the nuclear industry. So So we covered quite a lot of stories tonight, not all of them. I had 50 stories for tonight. We'll pick up the rest of them on Sunday. I'm hoping the weather is going to break here the weekend because we got emaciated birds washing up on a large part of the coastline. I want to take off and investigate it. It takes decent weather for me to pull that off. And we're out in the Atlantic Ocean on an island, so the biggest migratory spot on the entire planet with 46 million migratory birds are supposed to cut through here each year. And so I'm going to burn a tank of fuel the weekend for sure. Hopefully I'll have some footage the weekend to share with you on Sunday. Now, how did the poll do tonight? We got 49 votes. Wow, that's pretty good. Should the United States clean up the Bikini Atoll nuclear wasteland? 49 votes. Wow, that's really good. And we got 86 people says yes, and 14% says no. Why would you say don't clean up the Bikini Atoll for? Why would that not be a good idea? We're going to end the toll, I guess. End the poll. End the poll. There you go. The poll's over. Yeah, good night, everybody. I'll do a quick shout out while we're at it, I suppose. It's a habit now. Good habit. I appreciate everybody. I'm no different than you. I'm just like you. I have the same hopes and dreams as you do. Good night, Boston. And Colette S. Hi, Colette. And Sam. Shane. And Dana Nasana. Chad. Ella. Hi, everybody. Daryl Murray. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Check your subscription because YouTube will unsubscribe you when you're not paying attention. C. Brown. And subscribe. When he said, you don't care if you subscribe. As long as you come and check, right? You'll find the videos. Steve Edwards. I know Swanee D. Mentioned that he thought it was 30 million one-time bags. So did I, but the numbers were updated to 60 million. Anna C3, Warren, and Warren. John 2H. Good night, everybody. It's a hard show today. A lot of stuff to get through. I have 50 stories ready to go. Dale P. It takes all day to do it, right? And I'm doing my shows. I start my shows 10 p.m. at nighttime, my time. So it's almost midnight now. Ted Richards. Robert Kovacs, we have lots of people here tonight. Wow, Thinker. Kevin Blanche was in the house tonight. Hi, Kevin. Yeah, it's an absurd amount of work to do these shows every day. It's an absurd amount of work. I'm proud to have the opportunity. I'm tickled pink that I get to do my part. Johnson, good night, everybody. Chuck. James Allhan, hi, James. DeHark. And anybody, I miss anybody? I'm almost to the bottom here now. I only serve one king. Hi, Laurie. And James Mangan and JAFAS. God bless you. And Ella. I gotta make this bigger. Forgot my glasses again. Nirrad Yerloff. Good night, everybody. Your soul, you are SUL. Thank you. Yeah, good night, everyone. Appreciate everybody participating in the poll. It was a good poll. I think they should clean up. I think they should clean up the Bikini Atolls. Why not? Sounds like a cool thing to me. Yeah, good night, everyone. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. There are links in the description at the very bottom if somebody wants to donate. I'm going to be burning money the weekend. Have a great night and a great weekend. We'll see everybody on Sunday in about 48 hours. Good night, folks. Hugs for everyone. You're welcome, Colette. You have a nice night, too.
Friday.